politics, like so many other arenas in India, is male dominated. How did Nari Shakti become so important to the BJP in the last couple of years?
Well, I think, there has been a steady increase in women's participation in elections and in decision making over the last 10, 12, 15, over the last 3 elections. And this election, it's interesting. The Congress has gained women's votes in Rajasthan and in Telangana. And in Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, the BJP has gained the women's vote. And most interesting is that in Mizoram, 81% women have voted for the ZPM.
Right.
I think that is remarkable because though the status of women in the Northeast is very different from that of North India or even South India, women's participation in elections in the Northeast has been typically very poor. And this election, the vote share at least indicates that women are making far more conclusive decisions in the elections in the Northeast.
In fact, joining us right now is Shikha. I'm going to interrupt you for a second.
Sorry.
Joining me now is Shazia Ilmi, national spokesperson of the BJP. Shazia, welcome to the News9 Plus Show.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Shazia, how did the women voter become so important to the BJP? Shikha was just telling us how, in the last couple of years, 10, 15 years, women have started stepping out and playing an increasing role in politics and voting. How did the BJP figure this out? Was it 2019? Was it 2014?
I think women have really been the center point of almost all the welfare schemes announced and implemented by Bharatiya Janata Party. And if you look at the numbers, you'll realize that BJP has won actually 50 seats where women voted more than men. And Congress bagged about 30. So there is this realization that whether it's, if you look at Awas Yojana and the relationship of a woman with a home, or something like Ujjwala Yojana, which is so important for our women citizens, or it's Mudra Yojana, which is targeting more women than anyone else, or it's working on Izzat Ghar, which are toilets. They are aimed at women and making their lives better. So I think they have been very huge beneficiaries of the government schemes, which have been there by other parties too, and I would not dispute that. But I think they've been implemented with a lot of seriousness, and right at the level of administration, at the state level, but starting from center, they have been taken very, very seriously. And so the actual beneficiaries are women, and I think they have turned out in huge numbers. There are places, in fact, there are so many booths where the women turnout has been much more than that of men. And those are great numbers and very encouraging.
Absolutely.
So yes, our Prime Minister and BJP's manifesto, if you look at it, women are the center point, the focal point, the fulcrum on which the welfareism rests. So you think you educate a woman, you look after a woman, you look after the family, the neighborhood, the town. So it starts with the basic unit, that is the woman, the first and foremost. So it's the last mile connectivity means the last woman down the line. So I think this is the whole idea of Antodaya, and this is a philosophy with which Bharatiya Janata Party works.
In fact, Sudha, I was going to ask you, didn't this start in the South, this focus on the women voters? Wasn't it a Simply South moment there that you had MGR and later Jayalalitha focusing on the women voter to come back to power literally for, election after election?
Sandeep, very interesting what Shazia Ilmi there says. And I think it was in the 90s when Jayalalitha was inducted into the party. And a lot of men, as always, they said that why is she here? She's an actress.
Right.
But MGR decided that she could become the face who could get the women to co-opt with the party very well. And in the 1980s, I think it was in Madurai the first time that he introduced her. Even then, there were questions as to why her. But then MGR proved right, because with Jayalalitha, the focus on women was very, very strong. And one of the earliest schemes that they introduced was the cradle, the tottil as it's called in Tamil, the cradle scheme, in which, you know, if a mother, a lactating mother, food for her, nutrition for her, as well as taking care of the baby. And of course, later it was expanded, it became very expansive. It's about, you know, giving her household utensils and goods, and people laughed and said, listen, why are you giving women mixies and grinders and stuff? But then those women wanted it because their husbands were frittering away all the money in alcohol. Right. They wanted all that so that they could run their kitchens very, very efficiently. And then of course there were other schemes as well. So you're right, the South started it.
Right. Shikha, in fact, while Shazia was mentioning this focus on the women voter, it's a central, it's a core of the BJP manifesto. In fact, a lot of other parties have followed suit with schemes. But the overall representation of women in electoral politics is abysmal. I mean, if you looked at the recent elections, I mean, just 10 to 15% of women in all the states. So why this mismatch?
Well, let me go over a little bit of history and a little bit of politics. First and foremost, women's representation in the Lok Sabha is about 10 to 12% on average. And then you have a look at the fact that in the state assemblies, the performance is quite abysmal. Chhattisgarh this time has 21% MLAs who are women, with 19 MLAs. The rest in Madhya Pradesh, it's fluctuated between 30 and 27. In Madhya Pradesh, in Telangana, it has gone up slightly. It's not very good. In Rajasthan as well. Then you look at two other things. One is there was the women's reservation, 1/3 quota for women in Panchayat Raj institutions. Right. This was the 73rd and 74th Amendment way back in Narasimha Rao's time. That should have had a positive impact, but it seems to have failed at the level of the State Assembly and, of course, significantly at the state of the Lok Sabha, in other words, the MPs. Then you look at the fact that in about 2017, 2018, you get the 50% reservation for women in Panchayati Raj elections. There, again, the impact has been very, very poor, except that more and more women are participating in the elections, but in a lot of places where it's a very dangerous trend, the decision making continues to be made by the men. Right. Therefore, there is much work that needs to be done. And if you look at the way in which political parties, they will pass a bill in the parliament. They will pass a bill in the state assembly saying reservation, we extend the reservation beyond 50%, as some states have done. And then you find that their nomination in the assembly elections or in the MP elections for women is abysmal, absolutely awful. There are one or two exceptions. Trinamool is one of those exceptions where they have gone up to about 40% reservation for women candidates. But that does not mean that the rest of the country is at the same level. And this is a change which needs to be made by the political parties in order to put their party where their votes have gone in passing legislation. This is a completely different thing. And then all the political parties, including the BJP, including the Congress and everybody else, they all come up with the fact that there's a winnability factor, right, as though women are incapable of winning elections. And I think all this between lip service and actually doing it on the ground, the political establishment has to get cracking. It is not sincere. And because of its insincerity, you find these numbers which we are looking at now, that in Madhya Pradesh, out of 230, there are only 27 MLAs who are women.
I want to bring in Shazia. Shikha, I want to bring in Shazia on this point. Shazia, do you believe that the point that Shikha made, the fact that women candidates aren't chosen because of that winnability factor, and so while political parties might make all these schemes to target the women voter, when it comes to actually handing out tickets, it's always the male candidate that gets the ticket. Do you beve that now, with the Prime Minister making these he said, as far as I'm concerned, there are only 4 castes, right? Women are one of them.
Yes.
And this 33% reservation. Do you think things are going to change in the next couple of years, or they're going to be more or less the same?
Well, they had better. You know, I totally agree with what Shikha ji is saying. You know, it's just suited everybody and for too many years. And despite the 33% reservation for women in the Panchayati Raj, the effects have not really been, you know, bottom up. And it's very sad, really. Also, I think a big problem is political parties fielding women from their families. Right. Essentially, and not really encouraging grassroots karyakartas and women workers from the party. So I think all these bastions need to be challenged. And people who don't have political mentors or families, or who are not wives and widows and daughters-in-law of famous political patriarchs, have it very tough.
Yeah.
And there has to be a better way to make sure that there is that kind of mentoring, hand-holding, and training and orientation mostly for women to be there. It is a tough world out there, and I agree it's there everywhere. And yes, when it comes to voters, they'll go for a parliamentary schemes. So also to show that women are winnable, they have it in them to get the votes and to win. Is my call. I am not necessarily fond of. I'm a big fan of the idea of reservations. I mean, right. I think it becomes like but I think sometimes it needs to be done. You know, this kind of an affirmative action to ensure that there are women faces there. But then there's one more thing: women who are there. You know, women also are a repository of patriarchal power. So, and the mandate for all who are there at the helm of affairs is to ensure that there is equity. So whether it's a man MP or a woman MP, they have to make sure that the commitment remains to equity and equality. And I find a lot of male chief ministers, even like Nitish ji and Naveen Patnaik and a prime minister, who are working steadfastly or for the empowerment of women and ensuring their better place. So one thing is representation of women in the parliament and a better representation at that. And another is actually uplifting the standards, working on delivery and mechanisms which ensures equity for men and women, especially the 4 castes that Prime Minister spoke about.
Right.
So I think those are very important factors.
Right. I want to bring in my colleague Lakshna. She's done this fine documentary on the BJP's W factor. Lakshna, taking off from what Shazia said, this chupa voter that the women were so far. I mean, have the chupa voters now started speaking up, and political parties have been starting to listen to them?
Sir, I'll give you an example right here. You're talking to 4 women. All of us have a very, very decisive voice.
Absolutely.
That's the power of, that's the Indian woman voter that you see today.
Right.
Not chupa anymore. Okay. You know, she may have been chupa, she may have been hesitant earlier, but still cast her vote in the way that, you know, she wanted to. But now she's speaking out. Right. And that's exactly the way I've begun my story. Because, you know, they are in Rajasthan. What mattered? Women's safety. In Chhattisgarh, what mattered? Giving women, you know, the kind of money that they wanted. So, you know, just as a direct cash transfer scheme, that mattered. In, you know, it's just about tapping into what the women wanted. And now women are with their voice. They're engaging with the political leaders on an equal platform. Right. You know, and that's what has changed the game, really, for political leaders. You know, earlier it used to be like, you know, what is it that women want? Nobody could really figure out what women want. But now women are telling the political leaders, right? We have a voice, listen to us. Right. And that's the seismic shift that has happened with, you know, women voters today.
Sudha, do you think this is actually going to translate into more women candidates? Are women going to say, we want women to vote for? We're tired of voting for men.
You know, I do not know. I'm kind of cynical about it. But hope, Lakshna, springs eternal. But one thing is there, if you remember, in general entertainment channels, they said that if a woman has the remote in her hand, then obviously those who have the buying power in their family tend to buy advertising.
News9 Plus. Download now.